Cathy. I'm so excited to be able to do this interview with you and also to have done the Women in Ministry Luncheon interview with you yesterday as well. But for those who don't know you, could you briefly explain kind of who you are, and then after you, I'll introduce myself as well.
Sure. Yeah, I'm really glad we got to do this together, and I loved your panel discussion this morning, so you did a really good job on that. My name is Cathy Chang, and I currently serve as the director of the counseling ministry at New Life Presbyterian Church in Orange County.
I'm Heidi Wong. I'm currently the executive director at Exilic Church in New York City, where I also oversee the college ministry, and with SOLA, I am the editor-in-chief. So for our conversation today, and it's sort of continuing some of the conversation from yesterday, is just talking about the importance or the opportunity that women have to receive theological training and education. So could you just share with us what that journey was like for you? How was it formative? Anything you learned along the way?
Yeah, I look back in my time in seminary, which was a while ago, with so much fondness. And it really was kind of a turning point for me in my life. I had been a public school teacher for 5 years. I was teaching ESL, and I got to a point in my life where I felt like I needed to reevaluate things. I also was serving as part-time children's ministry director at my church. And as I was preparing for every Sunday, I realized that I had been going to church for most of my life, but wasn't really confident in how I was understanding, reading, interpreting, teaching the Bible. So I started to toy with the idea of going to seminary, and God brought everything together in a very God-like way. And then I ended up going to Westminster in Philadelphia, and still serving at my church. So I was commuting back and forth to Virginia at the time. And that whole period of my life was just so transformative for me in so many ways. The first piece for me, I did my degree in counseling. And I started out in a different program, but I ended up doing the MDiv. And for me, the process of understanding theology and what it was that I said I believed, combined with the counseling piece of theology applied to life, changed so much changed really everything about how I understand God, myself, other people. And so I'm so thankful for the way that all happened in my life. How did you end up going to seminary?
So if you were to have talked to me, in college or even high school, I had no conception of what seminary was or what kind of people went to it. But during college, when I was at the church I was at, there were a few older, upperclassmen where they would graduate and then they would go to seminary and, do a counseling program, or they would go to seminary and just maybe get a job in corporate afterwards. And so I think that kind of normalized the idea for me, where it was no longer kind of like a thing that only people who are going to be pastors do. And so, Pastor Owen today on the panel was talking about, broadening the imagination. I think that was one of the moments that broadened my imagination of, oh, maybe that's not for me, but that's cool that exists and people are pursuing that. So when I moved to New York City, I eventually landed at the church I'm still at, which is Exilic Presbyterian Church. And at the time, it was, small church, a couple of pastors, and I had all these questions, right? And I knew that the pastors weren't there to just answer my questions. They had people to take care of, they had counseling to do. And so I just thought, you know what, RTS, Reformed Theological Seminary, they have a New York campus. It was a few years old at the time. So I started playing around with the idea of, I'm working full-time, but maybe I could part-time do classes, or maybe I'll just audit classes. So I visited a class just to check it out and see, and it just so happened that the professor of that class spent a number of years in consulting, which I was in at the time. So he also broadened my imagination once again. And when I explained, I would like to learn more about God and the Bible, and want to pursue this, but I'm really not really sure if I can handle this with my schedule in client services, he really encouraged me, you know what, you can just enroll. That way you can fully interact in class. That way you have to do the papers and I have to grade them, so that you get real feedback and you deepen your understanding of the word. And so I was really kind of encouraged by that, and also had the encouragement of the pastors at my church to just, try it out and pursue it. So I went in not really knowing if I would finish the degree, if I would like it, but I ended up doing 4.5 years part-time in a master's in an MA program, and just finished, graduated about a year ago in January. So yeah, wearing the cap and gown definitely felt like it was a long time coming. So I'm so glad that I went, and I think especially in a place like New York City, I was able to interact with people who are at a Reformed seminary, but they come from all different kinds of faith backgrounds. New York's a very diverse place, so interacting with different cultures and ideas, and also we're all under the same kind of teaching, and the community aspect of seminary for me was a big blessing, and I think one that I hadn't really expected. I think going in, I just thought I was going to go there to learn, but I came away with like a whole new group of friends and people who are in different ministry positions that I know I can always reach out to, just to check in, or a word of encouragement, or just to see like, how do you do this at your church, or how have you handled this situation in your ministry? So I think that was a huge blessing for me. The second question is, as an Asian American woman, what were some of the challenges of pursuing a theological education? So maybe for this one you can start again, and I'll go after.
When we had kind of briefly talked about it before, I was saying that I'm not sure how my experience differs from any other woman, because I only know who I am. But I will say, I think that pursuing theological education can be difficult for any woman, because you're in a place that is dominated by men going into pastoral ministry or pursuing academics and things like that. And so I think even just to pursue it as a woman, whatever your ethnicity is, can have its own particular challenges. And so, heading into seminary in that way, you just kind of have to be ready for being in that kind of environment. And maybe it's different for you in New York, but where I went, Westminster, at that point in time was 15% women, 85% men. Since that time, I don't know what it looks like now, but since that time, a lot of the MA programs, which were more heavily populated by women, have gone online. So I imagine on campus, it's probably even more male-dominated. And so I think just, that aspect of being a woman, there are some hurdles there to kind of move through and overcome, even to make the decision to go. I think maybe to be honest, maybe one of the primary ways that it was difficult for me as an Asian American is some of the cultural things, that the expectations, even from parents. When I went to seminary, I was 28. I had been working already for 5 years, and I was very single. I think times have changed since then. This was, over 20 years ago. Things have changed since then, and I think the expectations for when to get married and things like that have, they've morphed some. But for me at that time, 28 by my mom's standard, we're very old to be going out to seminary and starting something new. And I told my parents from the get-go, I was like, I am not going to seminary to try and meet someone or, look for a husband. And so there was some of those things, some of the cultural things that came into play in my own family, and some things that I even had to overcome in my own heart in terms of what did I think life was supposed to look like for me as a Korean American woman. And I think even in the process of deciding to go, God dealt with a lot of those things in my heart, to the point where I got there and I was like, this is where I want to be, and I want to do it for the purposes of learning and serving the church. So that's one aspect. So I don't know if you have anything different.
Yeah, as I was thinking about this question, it's interesting. I also agree. Part of it is just as a woman, there are certain things that you experience and you're not really sure how it stacks up. But in addition to taking classes in the New York campus, I would sometimes go to DC or to take a class that was only offered there. Be there for a week, 9 to 5, knock it out, and write a few papers. And I think the culture at each campus is probably different. So wherever you're going to seminary in the country, I think at some other campuses outside of New York, there was more, again, it was an innocent, kind of well-meaning question of, why are you here? Like, why are you going to seminary if you're not, going to do children's ministry, or like, why are you really here? And again, children's ministry is really important, but for me, that was not something that I felt called to do. So initially I was going, to learn, and I had all these questions, but it really turned into like a big blessing where it wasn't just the head knowledge, it was being formed by wonderful professors. And many of the professors were just white men from the South. So I think initially that was a little bit intimidating. I wasn't really sure if they would understand where I was coming from or be able to answer questions I had that were more culturally specific or specific to a New York City culture, or maybe even specific to an Asian American perspective. But what I'm really thankful for from many of my professors at RTS, especially the ones that would teach classes in New York, is they were so just gracious, and they just listened, and they didn't always have an answer. And so I think I was really more encouraged by my experience than anything. I think I had moments where I was like, oh, why are they questioning why I'm here? Or I'm not really sure if I really appreciate the question. But then I had all these other moments where there were people who wanted to invest in me for me, and wanted to grow me for me, and for my future in ministry, whatever that looked like. So I think I came away from seminary with a lot of positives, and I can attribute that, again, to the professors, and also like the executive director there, Jay Harvey, who was really intentional about trying to create a space where anybody can come and be sharpened by this theological training and education, and be themselves in that process. So yeah, I don't know if I have as many challenges as like blessings, but hopefully this blesses somebody out there. So for the next question, and I'll try to start with this one. What wisdom and encouragement would you give women in Asian American churches who desire to pursue theological education? I will share some things. I'm sure there's so much more that could be said. But I think sometimes there's this mental hurdle of, I know that this is out there, but I don't know if I want to go into ministry. I know that I have access to potentially this resource or this school, but I'm not really sure what I even want to do with the degree. And so I think that can feel a little bit like, what is it even worth going if I don't even know what I'm going to be doing? So for anyone out there who may feel that way, just from my story, I was in that boat as well. I had no intention of starting a college ministry or becoming an executive director at a church. It was more so, I love God, want to know more about him, and somehow maybe he'll use this training in the future. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm just going to go. And so I think having some of that perspective and attitude of being okay with not knowing what the end is going to be, but also being open-minded along the way, and just saying yes to things sometimes, just to see, am I gifted in this? Am I not? Is this something that I enjoy doing? Is it something that I don't enjoy doing? And just trying to see, take opportunities and really make the most of them. And also, while you're going through this process, I think it's really important to not do it alone. So for myself, like my staff, but also I had just regular friends in my life who had seen me from, consultant Heidi to like tech Heidi to Heidi wants to go to ministry Heidi, or wants to go to seminary Heidi, and just kind of walking with me through that journey just as friends. And I think they know me really well. They know what I'm interested in, and I think their affirmation went a long way. So yeah, I think just trying things and then making sure that you have a community of like a safe kind of space that you can be yourself in and get feedback. Like, Cathy, I think I really want to do this. I really want to pursue this. What do you think? Like, I don't really know. And just having other people speak into your life was huge for me as well. So
yeah, I love what you said about that. And I totally agree with you. I think for both of us, having kind of the encouragement of our pastors, which I didn't mention, but you did, was a really big confirmation for me that this was something that I could consider and feel free to really think about and pray about and pursue. Because when I started thinking about seminary, I went to my pastors and they immediately said, yeah, go, learn. They actually told me, go to Westminster, do counseling. I didn't know any of those things at that time, and so I'm so thankful for that encouragement that they gave me. I also happened to have a friend who we had never talked about seminary, but I told her one day, I said, hey, I'm thinking about going to seminary. And she was like, I just got my application in the mail
Oh,
last
wow.
week, which was really crazy. We hadn't
Yeah.
talked about it, so we ended up going together.
Yeah.
So if you get that opportunity, it's priceless. So we got to go together, but I totally agree with you that having people kind of speak into and affirm what they see, and that you know, is an encouragement that would, you know, push us in that direction. I think honestly, anytime I meet a woman who says, "Hey, I'm thinking about pursuing some kind of theological education," I am a big cheerleader. Because I feel like for so long it has felt something that's relegated to men and to pastors. And I agree with you that the path for women is not always clear.
Right.
It's not like, you know, in our denomination, it's not like we're going to become pastors. And so we may not necessarily know the outcome or the end game of it. But I also feel like in a sense there is some freedom in that. That we can go and we can explore and we can go for the joy of learning. It's not necessarily just a stepping stone to get somewhere else, which is what it was for me. I mean, I had a job lined up, but I really wanted to go because I saw the need to understand my own faith. And I tell people all the time when I meet them and they ask me about seminary and they're like, I don't know if I can, you know, if I can get a job after that. And I tell people, honestly, I went to seminary full time. I quit my job. I invested 3 years of my life when I was very single. And even if I had never gone into ministry, even if I had never done children's ministry or counseling or anything, for me, it would have been 100% worth it because it was so transformative for me. Understanding my faith. And then the counseling, like I mentioned, is so applicable in bringing that theology home that it really changed everything that I knew and thought about who God is, who I am, and who people are. And so for women who are considering it, you know, I'm going to just put a plug in. There are so many options now that I would say, see what's out there and then pray and see where God's leading.
Yeah, kind of what you were saying about, you mentioned your friend that had just put in her application. And for me, we hadn't planned it, but I was thinking about going to seminary around the same time Sujin Park, who's also at this conference and was a speaker here, was considering it as well. So it was just funny for us. I think she ended up doing the MDiv program and I did the MA. She was in the DC campus, I was in New York, but it was just so awesome to have, you know, our friends from college, and then who knew that we would be on this journey kind of at the same time, and being able to share about like what we're learning and, you know, professors that we've had and like recommending classes to each other, and then being able to take classes together, I think was like a huge blessing as well, to be able to process like what, like the things about God and, you know, the church and even like church history that you're like, wow, that's amazing. Like I never knew, like I just never knew. And then being able to find ways to not just be like, oh, that's so great, but integrate that into something I'm doing for college ministry at church, or just like conversations I'm having with people in my community group and whatnot, and being able to just really pour out everything that I'm learning and gaining from that kind of education. The last question we'll discuss is, and you sort of spoke to this already, but are there any other kind of encouragements that you can offer Asian American women who would like to pursue theological education, but for whatever reason, right now it's hard for them because of life circumstances or just other things that, you know, life happens and it gets difficult?
Yeah. I've thought about this a lot because of my context in doing biblical counseling. And I don't want to say that I'm thankful for the pandemic, but through the pandemic, I see how God can make good things out of hard things. And one of the things when it comes to theological education is that there are so many opportunities now. And I feel like so many seminaries have put a lot of their programs online, have made courses available. And so I know that it is hard, and I think for most of us, we're probably not at a point where you can just pick up your, you know, life and move it somewhere else and necessarily go to school for, you know, 3-4 years, whatever it takes. So I would just say to explore the options. If you can talk to other women who have gone and hear about their experiences and the path that they took. I feel like if you talk to any woman, the path is going to be a little bit different.
Right, yeah, for
and
sure.
so, you know, to talk and to find encouragement in that, and to think it doesn't have to look the way we think it has to look. So there might be flexibility, there might be options out there, even doing one course at a time. If it's a financial obstacle that's in the way, talking to your churches to see if there are options for if they can support you, things like that. If you have financial concerns, so in that respect, I feel like we are at a very pivotal point in terms of theological education and what's available to us. So that would be one encouragement that I have. Do you have any others?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think in addition to kind of what you're saying, sometimes, like I said earlier, you could start and kind of see where it goes and may not finish. But sometimes when you don't know what you want to do in ministry, even though you feel kind of called to it, there were moments in seminary where people I didn't really know would just affirm some kind of gift that they saw in me that nobody else had pointed out. And I think that those were really crucial moments. I remember when I handed in my application and the executive director at the time, he just said something off the cuff in my interview. He said, you have a gift of communication and I know God will use it to bless others in ministry. And I had never really shared my writing at that point in time publicly in any way. This was the first time someone was giving me feedback on something that I had written. So I just thought, oh, he's just being nice, they want me to enroll. But that really stuck with me throughout my 4.5 years of being in the program. And so I think you don't know who you'll interact with and what they'll see in you and affirm in you. And the other thing I would say is, and you sort of mentioned this, but I'm so grateful that RTS had a part-time track where I could still work full-time, so there's less of a financial burden, and then be able to be stable and attend school without a lot of anxiety, and also stay in my local church. So when I was considering seminaries, I didn't want to leave New York, and so I'm so just grateful that opportunity was there for me, and I was able to have this same community walk with me and I with them throughout that journey. So so thank you so much for this conversation. I really learned a lot and enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So thank you.